they have the capacities to use really concentrated sound to recognize anomalies in the body and to create sonic pulse and bursts that create healing at a cellular level. And there's a growing body of scientific evidence and study with dolphins around the world, of folks who are having tumors and other conditions identified by dolphins that are paying special attention to these areas of injury or illness in their body. And then even experiences of really dynamic healing occurring after these exchanges with dolphin sound. And so that's one of the reasons that folks might want to go meet these animals. Another reason is to really have a firsthand experience of expanding consciousness. So many people in our culture are exploring consciousness through meditation or through psychedelics or through breath work or through yoga. And the biggest, most immediate shortcut that I have found to having a experience of expanded consciousness is being face-to-face with whales and dolphins.
Welcome to the Weekly Transit. Interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. There's nothing more fascinating to me about this Earth than the people who inhabit it. My mission is to create deep, vulnerable, and open conversations that invite our unique guests to share the arc of their ever-evolving journey through life, in the hope that their stories inspire and resonate with you, our listeners. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian.
I am a crystalline form, earthborn, embodied with feet, but calling to be set free in the deep. Just give back my fins and I'll leave these streets, take a big sinking leap into new soundscapes. Swimming to seek an underwater peace in which to resonate, reverberate, restore the flowing order of nature called awake from a long human sleep in an early grave, trapped under the grind of work and then pay. Big money extraction got us chained, walking like zombies, programmed to stay in line like we're enslaved. So now we break free, jump in and forget all that shit, ride the sunset back into the waves of passion, of play. Warm ocean spray across nature's wet lips, inviting us into her dance. We move and we sway. Back into body sensation, a listening place where wisdom emerges from quieter space. In deeper ways that might fail sharp listening ears on sunny days, above the surface where eyes are trained to convince the brain to categorize, to name and restate all things as facts, measured and weighed, controlled to obey by language in place to divide the whole world into two categories: known and unknown, safe and unsafe. The polarities of today on open display, leaving our sparkling spectrum snapped in half, broken, displaced. In a parallel maze where we were trapped in habitual ways, all humans trained to forget about interplay. And instead made to feel alone and afraid of cold water, of darkness, of the enormous living things swimming down there beneath the waves, beneath the waves. But I feel no fear, instead drawn by a deep need to hear them. An invitation to slow down and feel. Then we can return to ways of knowing, connection and pleasure, protection and pain. All felt sensations of self inside the animal body. A wilder domain where we can shatter the barriers we build with our brains and return to our bodies electric, hearts beating at a pounding pace, that ancient drum a lifeline to trace back towards cosmic ocean as we fall into cadence, returning to grace. Following that beat deeper into a wild open space, the original holding place of wonder, where we feel our origins, remembering our place as light beams crossing deep space, transcending the bounds of this time and this place. A felt sense of knowing, shaped by invisible threads tied into place with sounds woven through ocean, ancient songs evolving at a whale's pace. They restore the connections that we break. Their ancient souls trace back to how we are joined, one heart to another, lifetimes together encased in experiences made to show us new ways to feel each other, intertwined and amazed. About to be saved by the memory that we are one with these tribes. The whales, the dolphins, showing the way, wisdom keeping way, finding, guiding our return to life as sacred space. A balance of ferocity and love, a cosmic embrace, pulling us back into joy to rediscover the place where we can love unafraid. Consciousness embodied in smooth ocean bodies, a black and white balance of predator and play.
Welcome to the weekly transit. I'm here with a very special guest, Amber Herzog Lyman. Very special for multiple reasons, which makes sense because Amber is a Gemini rising, so that multiplicity. She is a Pisces sun and a Virgo moon. Amber, you're my fifth guest, I think, that's a Gemini rising. I think I've interviewed 14 guests, and 5 of the 14 have been Gemini risings.
We're great talkers.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to just say, like, you love to talk, so I love it. It's great. But Amber is special because for 2 reasons. Just, there's multiple reasons, but the 2 main reasons for me are, number one, I've known Amber for a very long time. When did we meet, Amber? Do you remember? Do you know?
I remember your sister from kindergarten, but
Oh, wow.
she was a lot more my type, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we weren't at the same school, though, so you were at a different
Yeah, and you were a
school.
little bit older. Older brothers
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
kind of a
I know. I
different
was going to say,
vibe.
like, am I kind of like like the dick older brother? Because, like, I'm
Yep.
like, I don't
Not kind of.
remember.
If I had to pick someone for that archetype as a
Really?
child, yeah, I didn't even know you. I just heard about how terrible you were.
Really?
Oh, you made a good business of annoying your sister.
Okay. Wow. I didn't realize she was telling everyone how terrible her brother was.
Yeah, you used to do some things that were consistent and
Oh, I don't
unrelenting,
know.
and
Yeah, I guess I was annoying. Yeah, I was the annoying older brother because
but
I'm like I didn't know you. I don't feel like you entered my conscious until I guess maybe high school.
yeah, I think it was
It was
even
when
later. Like you really have
yeah.
matured into a very excellent human being.
Oh, cool.
And
Thank you.
as you got older and more
Yeah.
open and more compassionate, you were a lot more fun to talk to. And you're one of my favorite
Could-
people to talk to
Oh,
because you know a lot about how the world works, and especially the stars and the planets, which
yeah.
I really have enjoyed learning with you.
Cool. I love it. Thank you, Amber. Yeah, I mean, I just remember, Carrie was a freshman when I was a senior, and I just, I think you were a part of her group
Hmm.
through high school. And yeah, but we didn't really have a relationship, you and I, until after high school. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe even after college. I remember I felt like I visited with you, and you were in LA for a little bit when you were in college, or right after college. You were
Yeah, Carrie
visiting your,
Carrie lived with us for a little bit, lived with me.
yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's when it really first kind of hit me who you were. Like, was that moment, because I went over to your aunt's house, or who were you living with?
Was that the white apartment
It was in
or the
Culver
tree house?
City, and it
I
was
was by myself. Yeah, Carrie moved in with me for a short time when she started that job at Sony.
okay. You were living in Culver City in
Mhm.
like some wooded kind of areas, like a
It
brown,
was like a
like
tree
wooden.
house. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, that was
Yep.
the first time yeah, that's when it clicked. That's when you clicked for me. I was like, okay, so this is Amber. I guess I should remember her now. So, uh,
And that was 26 years ago now, so we've also put in
wow.
some time since.
Amazing. But the second reason why Amber is so special to me, not just, in the terms of the longevity and the depth of our relationship, is also because if you've been listening to this podcast for the last year plus, maybe year and a half or so, you've heard Amber's music, because the intro and the outro for the weekly transit is courtesy of Amber. So, Amber, tell us about your music, and where that comes from. What are we listening to when you're listening to the weekly transit? What are people hearing when they listen to this podcast, and the introduction and the outro? That's your creation.
Yeah, it is my creation, and it's a song called "Shifting Gravity," and
Hmm.
it's so informed by my relationship with the cosmos. Um, I'm a deep lover of planet Earth. I'm a nature person. I love the earth and I love the ocean, but oh man, do I feel called to the stars and the cosmos and the planets.
Hmm.
I've been studying, yoga and meditation for almost 25 years, and the deeper I've gone into my meditation practice, the more I've kind of zoomed out in the way that I feel planet Earth. And as my relationship with astrology and the cosmos has grown, I've realized that we are not the center of gravity
Hmm.
here on planet Earth.
No.
I mean, we feel the gravity of the Earth, but the sun has more gravity than we do. And then
Hmm.
there are literally millions of stars just in our universe that have so much more gravity than planet Earth. And so
Yeah.
that song called Shifting Gravity is all about that view of shifting our look from our earthly perspective to a more cosmic place. And then feeling the
Hmm.
ways that as we zoom in, things get more human and then more complicated.
You are here. Solar systematic in rotation, so attractive. Gravity of heavy planets firmly planted pull me closer like a magnet. I feel it. Magic. That space between us orbits gravid, a pregnant pause so holographic, light in layers, electric, static, rub so soft friction sparks erratic, lightning cracks. Wind with a voice that moves, charismatic. Thunder rolls, sky splits open, air's rebalanced, blows through my mind like storm-raised breezes, clear out leaves in fall. 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 I'll wait. I'll wait to land back down to earth. Winter, spring, summer, all grow tall, rising, washing, rain-fed waterfalls keep me clean so I can see the right way to pass one more slow day. I'll just keep to my roots till the seasons change, get rearranged, till the tide shifts in and we flood again. Till you see me, till you need me,
I'm a poet
rising to the
by
thirsty.
trade. That's my primary access point to creativity. Is I think and feel in poetry. And as I explored how to make that poetry more seen and heard and felt in the world, I started performing and recognized the power and the potential of my voice and how different it was for people to receive my poetry in my voice with my intonation and my emotion versus on the page. And when that met up with my really deep love of music, I started exploring ways to make songs out of my poems. And Shifting Gravity is one of those that was born out of that process.
And where do the whales play into this? Because there's actual whale sounds right in this.
On that track, the track
Yeah,
called Crystalline Form. Yeah, Crystalline Form is that's actually the intro track for the
crystalline form.
podcast.
And so shifting gravity is like the album, or shifting, did I say that right? It's shifting.
It's another track on the album, but I was
Oh.
thinking into the I was just thinking into the ways in which my music was so inspired by astrology.
Hmm.
So Shifting Gravity touched into that exchange between the earth and the cosmos, and the whales play into it because I've been studying whale communication and sound in a scientific way and a creative way since about 2009.
Hmm.
I've always been a lover of whales and dolphins since the time I was a kid. I thought I could grow up to become a dolphin if I
Hmm.
practiced hard enough, and so that's what I was doing in the pool at age 6 or 7.
Very
Um,
Pisces of you.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been longing to return to the ocean my whole life. And that's what Crystalline Form is about. Some of the lyrics of that song talk about trading in my feet for fins
Hmm.
and returning to the wildness of the ocean, returning to the freedom of the ocean. I've been studying whale and dolphin communication, sound, and consciousness in different ways um, for a myriad of purposes, both for research purposes and then as a film writer, as an ocean advocate, as a poet who contributes to ocean conservation projects worldwide. And I started to recognize the ways that the whales are very attached to seeing and feeling and hearing the space around us because they're in the middle of the sea and our oceans function like big satellite dishes collecting the energy of our solar system and of the cosmos. You know, they're these big aquatic spaces that are a different medium for sound to move through than how it works in air. And so when the whales are singing and communicating, their sound is traveling through liquid medium, and that's much more akin to sound and light traveling through the cosmos.
Hmm.
And so, as I started to think about the ways that the whales are related to the sky and to the planets and to the stars, um, I had a deep longing for feeling that again myself because I experience our soul's experience as having a planetary aspect and a cosmic aspect. And I just feel like the whales are living closer to that in many ways.
How so?
Well, I really love the ways that whales match our capacity for intelligence and for communication. They have really complex, ongoing family structures and family relationships. Those are even more intricate for dolphins than they are for most whale species. But um, whales and dolphins are also like us, they're obligatorily social. A baby whale or baby dolphin can't survive on its own in the wild. It has to not only be fed and nurtured by an adult, but it has to be taught. It has to be taught how to live. And for some species, that takes a year to 2 years. For some species, it takes more like 4 or 5 years. For some dolphin species, they never leave their mothers. And that is really akin to the way that human culture is passed from parent to child. But for the whales, they are still living in this unbroken line of matrilineal wisdom, where every whale alive has learned all that it's learned from its mother, and she learned all that she knows from her mother, back on and on and on. Whereas for humans, we have made an election to educate each other and to form schools and institutions and other structures around the way that we think and the way that we teach. So when I look at whales who are emotional, intelligent, and communicative, but are still living in service and harmony with their families and their natural world, that seems really different to how we as humans have organized around different purposes and causes. Our survival, our way of surviving is different. Our way of learning is different, and it's really complicated for humans. It's really complicated. And as an ecologist and a nature lover living at this time on Earth, I'm really thinking about ways that we can live in greater harmony and reciprocity with the natural world. And so I have been looking to whales and dolphins and some other species as well as teachers about that, because we have been living in our current setup with these human bodies and brains for around 200 to 250,000 years, as archaeologists understand it. But the whales and dolphins have been living in their same brains and bodies for 35 million years.
Wow. So they've been around since like the dinosaurs or something, or
Not quite. That's
no?
that's hundreds of millions, but they've
Oh,
been around
okay.
a long time. And they've
Yeah.
been keeping the oceans in balance all that time. They've really been participating in the ecology of the oceans and how our whole global environment works, from weather to air circulation to how they move
What does that
nutrients around the sea.
what does that mean to keep the ocean in balance?
Um, Whales have a lot to do with the way that oxygen is produced and processed in the ocean. So there are many species of whales, like the great whales, we call them, the really big ones, like blue whales, humpback whales, gray whales, that move in these huge circuitous migration patterns around planet Earth. And they literally go and feed for months at a time in the rich, nutrient rich, food rich, cold waters of the Arctic and of Antarctica. And then in the summer months, they swim back to the more equatorial places that have warm water. And as they go, all of the minerals and nutrients from that months of feeding on mineral rich krill, and arthropods and different tiny foods, they circulate around the ocean, and they literally, through their urine, through their defecation, through the expression of their milk when they birth their babies, um, they literally deposit those minerals like fertilizer in this
Hmm.
entire round path that creates circulation around the entire ocean. And that is what fuels blooms of phytoplankton, plant plankton, healthy plankton, that are one of the biggest oxygen producing plants on planet Earth. So, when you and I grew up, we thought that the rainforests were like the lungs of our planet, right?
Hmm.
That's what we were taught, and that they produce, I think at that time I remember hearing, the rainforests produce like 70% of our oxygen. Well, now as scientists are studying it and breaking it down, we understand that actually over 50% of the oxygen production on planet Earth comes from phytoplankton, from tiny, tiny plants in the ocean. And this is important to the composition of our atmosphere and also to the depletion of oxygen in our atmosphere and the escalation of carbon. Because one of the other things that the whales do is, as they gather all of this biomass out of the ocean, when they die, they sink that carbon load literally to the bottom of the sea where it's
Hmm.
sequestered. Whales are a huge part of carbon sequestration on our planet.
And what
So,
does that mean exactly?
so when we think about, hearing about climate change or hearing about the change in the Earth's atmosphere, that we have a higher percentage of carbon in our atmosphere than we did 100 years ago or 500 years ago. Um, Part of that is because as living things grow out of the earth, or as animals eat other animals, they take on more matter, more carbon-based plant material or animal material, and they grow. They grow in weight, they grow in size. And they're taking carbon out of the atmosphere because the plants around us are photosynthesizing and taking in carbon, taking in CO2, releasing oxygen. And then as that plant material is eaten by other animals, then that carbon that was in the air is now sinking into the earth eventually. Eventually, every animal that dies takes its body, or every plant that dies takes its body into the earth. So that carbon that it used to grow, to make its plant material out of the atmosphere, goes down into the soil. That's carbon sequestration.
And it's being like reused,
It's being recycled, yeah, because
recycled.
then it goes into the earth, and then all the creatures there digest it. The
So it's like,
bacteria, the fungi.
are there still people out there that go and kill whales? Is that still an
There
issue?
are, yeah, on purpose and by accident. Yeah, there's a
What,
few.
by accident?
Well, unfortunately, tens of thousands of whales die every single year by a combination of ship strikes.
Like big, like tankers and that kind of
Tankers,
stuff?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I wrote a film in 2020, co-wrote a film called Ocean Souls about the conscious lives of whales and dolphins. And at that time, I really dove into the human risks of, what's out there threatening the whales today. And I started watching the maps of international shipping routes. There are live maritime apps where you can literally see every commercial vessel in the oceans on planet Earth right now.
Wow.
And on most days, pre-COVID, there was a fleet of around 50,000 tanker vessels, large commercial vessels moving around planet Earth at any given time.
And is that like everything from like a tanker ship to a cruise ship
Exactly.
to a military like aircraft carrier
Every ship
battleship?
that carries oil, every ship that
Mm-hmm.
carries petroleum products, that's a
Hmm.
huge part of the fleet. And then those big cargo ships that you see stacked with containers, every
Yeah.
single thing that you see in a Target, in a CVS,
Yeah.
on a gas station shelf, most of those things traveled across the ocean in containers.
Uh-huh.
And
So,
and when you
yeah.
start looking at that, and see the fleets of ships that are moving in and out of Los Angeles Harbor, Long Beach Harbor, you
Uh-huh.
recognize that in those waters, which are some of the richest feeding waters and core migration corridors for humpback whales, gray whales, and blue whales, not to mention many species of dolphins, you see that every single day there are thousands of ships moving back and forth across those channels where they're trying to migrate.
Yeah.
And the ships cannot see or detect the slow moving whales. Um, the whales are disoriented because some of those waters have ships and noise in every direction. And as they're trying to move through, often they collide.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's devastating to think about for me, as someone that feels so deeply connected to these animals. But I've seen many an image of, the bow of a tanker with a whale laying over it,
Oh
trapped.
my God.
And I've seen living whales myself. I've seen a humpback with part of its tail severed because of a ship strike.
Oh my
A
God.
few weeks ago, I just saw a gray whale with healed propeller scars across its back.
Oh my God.
And yeah, it makes me think really differently about how we use planet Earth as humans and think that everything belongs to us.
So,
Those really peaceful, majestic creatures have been out
yeah.
there for millions of years, and in the last 1,000 years, we've introduced boats and then took to the seas to hunt them and kill them.
So, you said prior to COVID. Does that mean
Hmm.
like since COVID there's been less or more or
Yeah, that was actually my favorite thing about um, all of the weird changes that happened during COVID is that commercial shipping traffic dropped by over 50% within the first 6 months of COVID, and then continued to fall slowly after that because people weren't allowed to travel. Um, uses of our fuel resources dropped dramatically, so less petroleum tankers were moving. And then because people weren't allowed to spend time in stores, shopping and commercial consumption went down so fast that there wasn't space for more consumer goods to come into our country. Everything just slowed.
But is it back up now? Is it back where it was before?
I don't know
Or
the exact levels. I know it's returned some, but now we also have a different means of delivery, right? There's been the bloom of Amazon and delivery since COVID times. I mean, even in the past 5 years, that's escalated so dramatically in the US.
but you would
Um,
think that that would increase the shipping, wouldn't it?
yeah, for sure. I don't know if it's back to pre 2020 levels
Oh,
or not.
okay.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot of other economic factors and things, but yeah,
It's it yeah, go ahead.
it's just I that's when I really started thinking about the ways that our daily habits impact not only the whales but all of nature. And as a writer and an advocate for them, I have worked hard to try to think from like inside their perspective and inside their consciousness and imagine what that must be like to live in oceans that are so crowded and noisy. And it gives me different sympathy and different understanding for why and how that's hard for people too. It's hard for people to sometimes live in those noisy, crowded environments as well. And I'm thinking about the whale's perspective and wisdom when I try to figure out what might make us feel healthier and safer as humans too.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're telling me that essentially whales are, beyond the energetic implications of who they are or what they do, which I'm sure we'll get into, but
Mm,
the just the nature of their being here is an integral part to oxygen
hmm
development. So
hmm
essentially, more whales creates more oxygen, better for people, but yet people are killing whales inadvertently or on purpose.
hmm
It's almost like a self-loathing
The
of
body of the
of
body.
people, of
Yep.
humans.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
body. Same. We could have the exact same conversation about trees.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
trees are another big teacher for me in nature and understanding the energetics of planet Earth and also the ecology. Humans. I was lucky enough to be raised in a lot of wild nature and to understand how my body is inextricably linked to the wild around me. And as I've traveled and advocated and performed around the world, I meet a lot of people that were raised in Manhattan or some other place where they've literally never seen a wild animal other than a squirrel or a bird.
Hmm.
They've never been on a trail in a forest. And so part of my mission as an artist is to help to re-expose people to the natural world in a way that inspires connection, hopefully reverence, hopefully reciprocity. Those are my core creative values.
Bringing people back to nature.
Yeah, in a way that's inviting and sweet and soft.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our planet Earth is a beautiful place
Hmm.
and has nurtured so many of us, this really biodiverse environment of plants and animals that we live in. And humans are not separate from that. We are every cell of our bodies is built from nature.
So where did your sweatshirt come from?
Where was it made?
Yeah.
This one? Probably in Asia.
So it came on a tanker.
It did. Yep. No,
Because I was
being
just thinking,
human.
like, what's that?
Being human, I'm looking for what country it was made in.
Yeah. Because I'm just thinking, like, should we never buy, or limit the amount that we're buying from outside the US that is traveling, over an ocean?
My,
Like,
I,
it's one thing if it's made in Mexico or Canada, but
we should just buy less. We should just buy
Yes,
less.
but with what we buy, shouldn't it be something that didn't come off of a ship?
Or or is reused in some way.
Reused. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So it doesn't matter where the damage is being done. Like shipping itself is a problem, but
Mm-hmm.
production of everything that we buy is a burden on the environment to some degree, and buying less is one way. If you want to have an individual impact, it's one way to do that. In my advocacy and talks about the environment, whether I'm talking about whales or trees or art or music, people often ask me, what can I do to make a difference? The number one thing is buy less.
Buy less.
Yep.
Okay. So on the song,
hmm Crystalline form, that one.
crystalline form, where are these whale sounds coming from?
So those are all inspired by orca. That particular song is inspired by orca.
Does that mean that what we're listening to is actual orca?
On that recording, I do believe it is.
Okay.
Yeah, that descending whale sound. Yeah.
So that's an orca. And
And
go ahead.
that song was inspired by my relationship with Monterey Bay. I live in Central California and I live a bit inland. So my closest, what I consider my home waters, the closest part of the ocean that I feel really deeply connected with is Monterey Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spent a lot of time in that place, studying that place and working in connection with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, understanding the ecology, because that's a very special part of the Pacific Ocean where so much food comes together, so many species. It's got a really high abundance of marine mammals, of whales and dolphins and seals and sea lions and otters. And I go there every once in a while to be with the whales, to see them in person and to listen to them and study them and see how they're doing, really. And there's a population of orca that move in and out of Monterey Bay, and for me, orca are one of the species that have taught me a lot about wisdom and about maternity, and
How
about
so?
raising babies. Um,
And what's the difference between orca and a whale? Why are they called orca?
that's part their scientific name. Orca orcus is the scientific name for the killer whale. What the common name is the killer whale.
Yeah.
And they're also commonly known as orca. So they are the largest of the dolphin family. They're part of the
Mm.
toothed whales. Um, all dolphins are whales, but not all whales are dolphins. Dolphins are smaller and have more athletic bodies, and they live in a different kind of pod structure than a lot of
Mm.
whales. Orca are the largest of those. They can get like 25 to 30 feet in length, and they have that beautiful, striking black and white coloration, and the big, tall, majestic dorsal fin. And they're really stunning, athletic animals. Um,
And what
they
is, yeah.
they come in and out of Monterey Bay hunting dolphins, hunting sea lions,
So they
hunting
eat
sea.
their own in a sense because they're of the dolphin family.
They eat a lot of things. They're powerful apex predators.
Huh.
And I've studied a lot of apex predators around the world, including lions and hunting dogs and leopard and others, and wolves. I just really am fascinated and have a real respect for those creatures and the way that they live. Um, and orca are phenomenal hunters. They have to hunt every animal, other animals every day or every few days in order to survive. And it is, the strong females in a pod who do a lot of the hunting, and their hunting is organized and orchestrated and requires a lot of communication.
Hmm.
um, so they form these alliances, primarily of females, but often with one mature bull in the mix, that are all based on family lines of mothers and aunties and daughters. And from the time that they're young, are big enough to participate, they teach the specialized hunting methods of their particular pod. And orca have their own culture all over the world. They exist in every ocean on the planet, but different pods or different clans hunt differently. So some pods of orca only eat salmon. Some specialize in hunting stingrays. Some specialize in killing great white sharks. Some only eat marine mammals.
Hmm.
But that culture of hunting and feeding is passed from mother to offspring, and each clan or pod is unique in the way that they hunt. Um, that really inspires me in terms of thinking about how we can care for and provide for our children. As I've studied leadership in the animal world, I've developed an increasing respect for animals that take care of each other.
Hmm.
Um, and we have been taught in a very old school way that nature is all about competition and isolation and survival of the fittest. But that is not actually true. Nature is actually all about cooperation.
Hmm.
It's all about co-weaving. It's all about co-evolution. Everywhere in nature, we see these linkages of populations that participate in feeding each other and cooperating in the way that they take care of not only their own, but even some that take care of other species as well. And the orca are a primary example of having a culture or society that's organized around taking care of and teaching their offspring and protecting them. Um, and again, I'm looking to nature for ideas about how to be a better human. And
But what have they taught you about motherhood? You were saying.
I think the ferocity of that protective instinct has been part of it. Um, they've also really taught me about the depth of grief.
Hmm. How
Yeah.
so?
Mm, when I've really touched into the feeling of that maternal heart that beats within the orca, um, it helps me understand as a mother. I've birthed two children. I have two of my own offspring. It really helps me understand not only that fierce instinct to protect them, but also the depth of what it's like to mourn the loss of a child.
Hmm.
And that gives me a different kind of empathy and compassion for all mothers that have lost children. And it really changes the way that I participate um, as a human in like feeling the grief of the world and also supporting people around me that are going through grief.
Have you witnessed an orca mother grieving their offspring?
Not firsthand, but I've studied a lot of video footage and heard firsthand interviews from other scientists who have. Part of that Ocean Souls film, one of the animal stories that we covered in that documentary was about an orca mother in the Salish Sea who lost a calf just a few days after it was born.
Hmm.
And she carried that calf through the ocean on her rostrum or on the beak of her nose for 18 days.
Oh my God. Wow.
And it was well documented. She came from a pod of orca that are some of the most studied orca in the world. They have scientists that are tracking them several days a week for their safety and for their well-being because they're highly endangered. And so there was quite
Endangered by humans hunting them?
those aren't hunted, but they are vulnerable to ship strikes. Their primary challenge is that they're starving. They are reliant on this is the southern resident orca that I'm speaking of now. They're reliant on salmon as their only prey, and they live in the waters of the Salish Sea,
Where's
like
that?
Washington State off the northern Pacific coast, and so it's an area kind of near the Canadian border. So it's an area of the ocean that historically has just been chock full of fish. all of those major rivers that drained water off that western part of the United States were full salmon breeding grounds. And so these orca have developed a hunting strategy over many millennia where they only feed on salmon because salmon is such a rich, reliable food source for them. But that's changed in the past 100 years.
Why is that?
And
Because people are eating too much salmon, or?
first issue was damming of all those rivers.
Uh-huh.
When all those rivers were dammed for hydroelectric power and concentration of water projects, then the rivers were cut off from the ocean, so the salmon couldn't breed. Salmon swim upstream to lay their eggs. So that was a huge blow. The second blow is that that's one of the centers of commercial fishing operations for the West Coast that serves a global market. And so salmon have been consistently pulled out of those waters for, steadily for the past 60 years, and to a lesser degree before that. But fish reproduction out there in the ocean can't keep up with the pace of our extraction. Fish stocks are crashing, and so for those orca, we've literally over the past decades watched them get thinner, thinner in their own bodies because they don't have enough food, and then thinner in their populations because their offspring aren't surviving. And
Wow.
so that population of whales that carries their own unique culture, that's the center of that ecosystem. They're like the apex predator, energetic guardians of that entire part of the ocean. Their population is down to 73 members.
73?
Mhm.
Oh my God, that seems like an incredibly low number.
It does. And, back to feeling that grief with them for the loss of their population and the loss of their offspring. And also feeling the grief of the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest that have had a spiritual relationship with those particular whales for thousands and thousands of years.
And they're extinct too,
They're
in a
experiencing
sense.
the same challenges.
Is this orca group going to survive? Are they going to repopulate somehow? Or is it a completely lost cause at this point because they're not going to blow up the dams and the fish
They
are going to
are
start?
blowing up some of the dams.
They are?
They're actually, in the past 3 years, there's been a successful removal of 4 dams off the Klamath River in Northern California, which is a major trout breeding river.
But
And
what
that
does it have to do with Washington State?
Well,
And
the fact that it's happening somewhere, that hydroelectric power source that we were relying on here in the West is being replaced by other more efficient, less expensive means. And so, if we don't need the hydroelectric power from those dams anymore, and we're recognizing the ecologic value of the rivers running, then at least here in Northern California, we've been successful at doing it once of removing those dams and starting to restore the ecology of that place because it's proof that we're starting to recognize that our survival as humans is reliant on the survival of other species and of the ecosystems around us. So having safe, clean water is just as important as having electricity. And having rivers that flow
probably
is,
more important than having
you can
electricity.
live without electricity a lot longer than you can live without water.
Yeah. Exactly. So
Yeah.
how many of these orcas were around like 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Do you
I
know?
don't know the exact numbers for the past decade, but I do know that this is one of the populations of orca that participated in the last wild catch of orca from the ocean for entertainment purposes.
Oh my
So
God.
in the
So
early
the SeaWorld
70s,
people. Yeah.
yeah, in the early 70s, there was a wild capture in the Salish Sea where orca were chased into a small cove with dynamite and with nets. And many dozens of orca were captured, and all the young calves that they could successfully pull out of the water were pulled from their mothers and shipped around the world. I believe that
That's
happened
where
1973 or 74, and just within the last 2 years, the last survivor from that capture died at a park called Miami Seaquarium. She was 51 or 52 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now they don't have any more orcas at the SeaWorlds and those types of places?
Not at that particular one. There are still captive orca around the world, some in Europe, some in the US, some in Asia.
Is it illegal
Um,
to do that now?
the wild catch is illegal for orca, but it's still happening for dolphins.
Okay, well, we'll get to the dolphins, but I'm just curious about, because like 73 orca left in this area. Obviously, there's more orca in other parts of the world, right?
Mm-hmm. And different populations in that area, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But 73 seems like an extremely low number where there should be some kind of plan
Mm-hmm.
to try to help repopulate them.
Yeah, I
What's
mean,
that plan? Does anyone have a plan? Is it somebody doing something like?
there are people working on it. There are scientists on boats that are out there tracking and protecting those orca, that are keeping watch on them so that they're less vulnerable from ship strikes. They're reporting their locations, they're mapping their locations, so that those who are out there in the ocean can be responsible and avoid them.
Mm-hmm.
um, there are legal efforts to halt the expansion of shipping ports in that area to reduce vessel traffic.
Hmm.
um, yeah, I had the great blessing of meeting a woman just a few weeks ago who was one of the attorneys who represented the Salish Sea Orca as her client
Wow.
in a case against a major petroleum company, in order to limit the expansion and operations of that company in the Salish Sea. And she won cases on their behalf all the way up to the federal level to establish that they had rights to be protected in that space. But salmon fishing is still happening there,
Yeah.
and major shipping ports are still in action there, and those are challenges that those animals live with.
Yeah. So what's being done about that?
Well, what else can be done? We can reduce our traffic and our use of that area, and there's people advocating for that. um, but this is not, the answer here is for us to back off and let nature thrive. I think when we think about extinction, we think about, oh, well, we have to capture them, we have to save them, we have to put the last of them in captivity and try to breed them and make sure that we keep their genetics viable. I mean, that's what we're trying with tigers and elephants and all sorts of other species.
That's not what
But
I'm thinking.
but the reality is people just need to back up out of their space, and they will survive and thrive more readily.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like that people need to be living more in conscious awareness and cohabitation with the rest of nature.
Yes, I agree with you.
So I'm just wondering, like, what that plan is, or what, does someone have a plan, like a solution? Like, what happens if we get rid of these dams? And if we stop fishing so much salmon over there, like, what is the solution?
Well, I think all of those incremental steps help. you know I think that what needs to happen, and what is happening in some circles, is at least growing our awareness that nature's relying on us for its survival, but we are fully reliant on nature for our survival.
I think that's the key right there. I don't think that's what people, maybe that hasn't been a conscious thought in modern day America. Like, if you're somebody who lives in New York City and has never spent any time in a
Hmm.
forest, sleeping in a tent, or going on a hike in the woods, it's, what is a grocery store? I mean, it's a place where you get food. You don't think
Yeah.
about where it comes from
Well, and
or
that's
how it got there.
and that's the thing, Scott. Like, I have had the opportunity to live in some ecosystems that and experience ecosystems that are almost untouched by humans.
Where is that?
I'm thinking about remote Alaska. I'm thinking about the Okavango Delta,
Where's that?
um, in Botswana, central Botswana. I'm thinking about more isolated parts of South Africa, the deserts of Namibia. Um, I'm thinking about the islands in the South Pacific within the Kingdom of Tonga. I'm thinking about some of the islands in the Seychelles, in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And in many of these places that I've been to research and to study ecology, I've been privileged enough to see what an actual intact ecosystem looks like.
And what does it look like?
Looks very alive, looks very abundant, very
Hmm.
diverse. And then I come back to Central California where I live, and even though this looks very alive because it's very green, there's a lot of crops and orchards and trees and pastures.
Hmm.
Um, I'm also really well acquainted with how many species of plants, animals, and trees are extinct on this land,
Hmm.
and knowing how much humans have changed this landscape. And here in California, the major part of that impact has been in our hydrology.
What's that?
Um, it's the way that water moves across the land. So, when I'm flying over a remote part of the African bush and I can see, that for 100 miles in every direction, there's been no interference to the way that water moves.
Hmm.
There are no dams, no canals, really no bridges, no tunnels. The water's just moving as it needs to.
Hmm.
And water is the basis of almost all plant and animal life. And here in California, we have cut the flow of our rivers and measured it into canals with concrete banks and reservoirs with concrete dams. And we've stopped the natural flow of rivers across almost all of California.
Hmm.
And so that has contributed to a substantial die off of primarily trees and animals.
Are you familiar with J.G. Boswell?
Mm-mm. I know the name, but I don't know the story.
Because there's a book called The King of California,
Mm.
and that's about J.G. Boswell.
Mm-hmm.
Because he came from the South and moved to California, and he's like, he's the person that changed the topography of California. You know that there was a lake in the San Joaquin Valley that was bigger than Lake Tahoe.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't as deep,
Mm-hmm.
but it was wider, or landmass took up more, the Tulare Lake.
Tulare Lake, yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
that's where a lot of his farming was and is. There, I mean, his company's still around, I think. So, he's long since died, but you know, that's like all the dams
Right.
in the Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley, that stop the natural flow of water.
Yeah. And that's only 40 minutes from where you and I grew up. And I'm sixth generation born here in two lines of my family. And I've been studying the natural world here since I was a little child, and even just watching the way that the natural world has changed here in 45 years
Hmm.
is dramatic.
Hmm.
There's so many fewer insects and birds and creatures than there were even a couple decades ago.
Really? Hmm. That's scary, I guess. You've been to every continent on the Earth except for Antarctica?
I've traveled a limited amount in Asia. I have not been to Australia.
Oh, you haven't?
Not yet.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Are you going to go there and to Antarctica at some point?
I don't have a desire to go to Antarctica. I feel like that's an imposition.
What
I
do you
think
mean?
just to get there, and there's so few humans on Antarctica, and it's changing so much. The trajectory of ice is changing a lot, and the animals are really impacted. And I don't really have a desire to go there and create any more impact.
Hmm.
Um, I think a lot of incredible artists and filmmakers and photographers are doing a great job representing that place, and showing us what it's like. So I don't have a desire to go there for myself.
Okay.
Yeah. But Australia, yes.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of ocean there.
There's whales I want to meet in Australia.
Yeah, who are those?
I really want to go to the west coast of Australia and spend time with the humpback whales there. And also there's some pockets that have a lot of whale shark activity. Whale sharks are big fish, not whales, but they're still really incredible ocean animals.
Hmm.
I've been lucky enough to see them off of Maui and off of the islands of the Seychelles, but I would like to see them near Australia as well.
So, what is the importance of whales or orcas, dolphins, aside from the fact that they're helping produce so much oxygen for us? What is the energetic implication of these
Yeah,
creatures?
yeah. I mean, I haven't really talked much about my professional background, but I have been a longtime student of sound and consciousness on planet Earth. And so when I'm talking about animals and ecology, a lot of my knowledge has been gained as I've been moving around the world, trying to learn more about communication and consciousness.
Hmm.
And again, I back to my deep roots in yoga and in meditation and also my own astrology. I mean, you can tell me, you have taught me over the years about why I am an explorer of consciousness and cosmos.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you think about it, you were born with, uh, the moon and Saturn, and then the North Node all in Virgo. And of course, your ascendant is in Gemini. Both those signs are ruled by Mercury. Mercury is the planet of consciousness.
Mhm.
And then, of course, you have your South Node, your Mars, and your Sun in Pisces, which is the sign of the unconscious. So, uh, Neptune, also the planetary ruler the of the unconscious, is squaring your moon and sun. You were born under a full moon, of
Mhm.
course, you know that. But both the sun and the moon are squaring Neptune. So
Mhm.
that's so interesting, because when you think about, it's like somebody might be listening. It's like, well, I'm a Pisces. I don't care about the ocean as much as Amber. But I mean, pretty much all Pisces I feel like they have some kind of connection to the ocean or to some form of healing, music. Those are all traits of Pisces. But when you're born with Neptune and you literally see the trident
Mhm.
of Neptune or Poseidon aligning with the sun and the moon, it's like you're emotionally fulfilled by the ocean. You identify with the ocean. So, this is also why music is important to you, but also the poetry, I think comes from the Virgo Gemini aspects of you, which is that urge to communicate and share your unconscious thoughts and dreams, fantasies.
Yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
I would describe that as like the fuel for my creative mission, and my personal mission over this past 5 years is how can I speak to the unconscious? How can I speak to the underlying layers of connection and emotion and energy that link all of us, not just humans, but humans, animals, plants, our very planet. Um,
Once you keep talking about like community, and linking people together, and it's like, you were born with Venus in Aquarius, which is the
mhm,
sign that represents the community, and you were born with the sun and the South Node and Mercury all in the 11th house.
mhm,
So you identify with being part of a larger collective community village, whether it's, the community you live in, or the community of the world at large, which includes not just people, but all species of life.
Yeah, and that's what I hope to speak to is exposing folks of how we can connect with our more than human kin as I think about them. And that brings me back to the dolphins and your question about like what bigger role are the whales and the dolphins playing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, aside from the really critical ecological role that we talked about with the whales, and the fact that there's approximately 3 million whales by our best estimates that fell during the 500 years of commercial whaling
Oh my
on planet
God.
Earth.
Wow.
But
When was that? So 500 years of commercial whaling was from when to when?
the 1500s to modern day. So the
Wow.
big international ban on whaling didn't happen until the early 1980s. That's when the last of that was made illegal, with the exceptions of a few countries that have carved out their own legal niche for whaling. So Japan, Iceland, and then some indigenous communities of the Arctic still hunt whales. Japan and Iceland, though, it's commercial. If you can
Mm.
believe it, some of the whales that are hunted in Japan are still eaten, and some of them are actually used for pet food.
Oh my God. Really?
Yep,
They get away with that?
yep,
That's crazy. I mean, it's one
yep,
thing if it's a part of your culture and it's like that's what I'm imagining if you're like living in the Arctic Circle or you're in Iceland, it's like it's a part of your culture in some way, but if you're
yeah.
just putting it in pet food, that doesn't really seem like I don't know. Am I being judgmental or
No, I don't think it's valid. No, I mean I don't think it's valid to slaughter wild animals to feed domestic animals, but
yeah.
that's a big part of the case.
Huh.
But as I've moved around the world and studied consciousness, studied human consciousness and the consciousness of nature,
Mm.
I've really paid attention to the roles that the whales play as holders of consciousness. And when you think about, consciousness as connection between living sentient beings, we think about human consciousness. Like clearly, we each have something going on in our personal experience that's happening beyond our body, whether that's our emotions or our love and connection for other people or the way that we see ourselves in connections to life on earth. All those things are part of consciousness. And then as humans, we connect with other humans. So our consciousness becomes linked in the way that we share conversations, in the way that we share ideas, through books, through movies, through art. All these ways we're exchanging consciousness. But animals, there are many, many populations of sentient beings, of animals who are not in human bodies. Elephants are magnificent holders of conscious awareness. Lions have a very strong sense of conscious connection to themselves, their environments, their families. And whales and dolphins are really deep, long term holders of consciousness on planet Earth. They have complex systems of communication, memory, culture, family, and language that they've been passing on from generation to generation for millions of years. And they have a lot of knowledge that they share with each other and that they talk about constantly, both through language, like dolphins, and through song, like humpback whales and other species.
Hmm.
And we know that they pass these songs and languages from individual to individual across entire oceans in some cases.
How do we know this?
Because scientists since the 1970s have been studying in particular the songs of the humpback whale.
Hmm.
Um, in the early 1970s, a sound scientist named Roger Payne recorded a full album that he released on vinyl called Songs of the Humpback Whale.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of his career to track the song and map the songs of humpbacks around planet Earth. So he did that work until his death 2 years ago.
Oh wow.
And so he was spawned this entire community of scientists who have studied whale song globally since that time. And he's the OG, he's the one he's been listening to humpback whales for over 50 years before he died. And one of the things that sound scientists have learned is that as humpback whales follow their migratory routes, they have parts of the oceans where new songs are kind of experimented with and spawned. So one of these spots is off the coast of Australia. It's a place
On
where
the West Coast, you were like where you want to go
I think
visit?
it is on the West Coast,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's one of the spots where scientists track and measure a lot of innovation and change to humpback whale songs. There's new phrases and new cadences that are developed there, and the whales experiment with them. And then every year, 2 years, there's a couple of those patterns that stick, that those whales carry and sing as they migrate, and that are picked up. And then those new patterns are recorded in songs around the entire Pacific basin. Maybe it takes 3 to 5 years for this new phrase or cadence to catch on, but then it's passed from animal to animal and it becomes integrated in the larger pattern. And, back to the idea of noisy oceans, today with those 50,000 vessels that we have moving around the sea, it's really hard for whales to hear. But 500 years ago, or even 200 years ago, when there were no engines at sea, some sounds of the blue whale, scientists think travel, hundreds of miles at a time across the ocean.
Wow.
And are able to be perceived by others.
Wow.
And so the whales have been for, again, millions of years, casting these interwoven webs of sound and song around planet Earth through every ocean. And that's a big net of connection and communication, much bigger than what humans were doing 1,000 years ago.
Why should people care about this?
Well, for me, I think about the origins of consciousness, right? And many cultures and individuals have their own stories, their own cosmologies about how consciousness came to planet Earth. Whether it was a single God that created man and created consciousness, or whether consciousness arrived here from the stars, or arrived here from another planet, or arrived from some other system of divinity, or whether it was some sort of cosmic spark that occurred on planet Earth that gave us the capacity for self-recognition and thought and communication. But again, back to the fact that the whales have been doing these things for millions of years before humans developed the ability to speak, really makes me pause and have some reverence for the bigger role, and a lot of curiosity for the bigger role that they might play in holding the consciousness of our planet. Millions of these massive creatures with the capacity to think and speak and care for each other and keep the ocean's health and ecology in balance, they're doing an important job for our planet. That's why I think people should care about it. But I know that not all humans relate to that.
Right.
That's also a reality.
Yeah.
And again, back to the thing that, we've been told that nature is our competitor, right? That nature is something that we could dominate, and that nature's a resource for us. That we can extract everything we need from nature and she'll be forever giving. That we can abandon all of our pollution in nature and that she'll somehow absorb it. That it's okay to bury our nuclear waste in the ocean.
That's what we do.
That's what we have done for many, many decades. Yeah. Sunk it in concrete tanks into the sea.
Wow.
There is a place out beyond our sounds where hearts they bloom right from the ground. A dissonance opens. Our minds grow round, bigger, brighter, blooming with possibility. We become the sunlight that we need to grow the seeds, the ones planted here by Mother Earth, to remind us, to draw us down toward rebirth. To feel for the roots of the mother tree, the one that connects you to me. There's an energy, fleeting, feeling a unity. There inside, deeper. Feel the tide? It is rising back towards infinity. Back towards infinity. We are here now in this new moment to feed each other, to free each other, to feel our way down through the stones, through our bones, back into the minerals that made us, to remember ourselves into the dirt.
And I mean, these are not fun facts to think about or talk about, right? Like, again, back to my astrology and my desire to understand, like, I really am on a not only a quest for knowledge, but a quest for wisdom about how we can be better humans, how we can be better stewards of this planet, and how we can take better care of each other by taking better care of nature.
And what are some simple tips for people to do just that? I mean, consume less. Okay. What else?
Um, I think we really have to start standing up to to toxicity in the chemicals that we use in our culture. Um, there's the toxicity of a lot of the daily products that we use in the United States are really compromising the health of our water and the health of our soil. And that's an issue that I've really tracked as it's impacted the health of people here in my home in the Central Valley. Um, yeah, the incidences of illness and cancer and autoimmune specifically here in California have just gone through the roof in my relatively short lifetime. And, as I've tried to figure out more about why that's the case, I see the chemicals that we use in our gardens and in agriculture and in our houses are disrupting a lot of the critical functions of our bodies, because they're
So you're
getting into
saying,
the water and
hmm,
into our food, and it's making a lot of us really sick.
so you're talking about like pesticides and just general household cleaning products?
Pesticides and herbicides, yeah,
What's the
yeah.
difference between a pesticide and an herbicide?
An herbicide is something that you're using to kill or control plants, and a pesticide is something you're using to kill or control animals that are feeding on plants.
Okay.
Yeah. So, herbicides, my biggest concern is about glyphosate. That's the one that I've done the most study with. Glyphosate is commonly known in the US as Roundup.
Mm.
And, when we were kids, Roundup was a really common weed killer that folks in our area loved because in the
It killed the
spring,
weeds.
everything grows. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it would kill the weeds without having to tractor or pull them by hand. Um, but what we found out, over the decades of that being in use in our area is that it also kills the health of the soil. It also radically alters the biome of the soil, which is the foundation of the biome that's in our gut. And the biome that's in our gut is what we rely on to actually digest our food and for the proper function of our organs. We rely on millions of species of bacteria to be in balance in our bodies in order to, um, in order to be healthy and well. And glyphosate has been a really strong ingredient in killing the bacterial health of our soil,
Hmm.
which has caused a lot of tragedy and illness in our area. Not to mention that it's just also straight up carcinogenic, and we're spraying it into the dirt around our, not only around our gardens, but it's used at schools, it's used in our neighborhoods, it's used in the waters, draining directly into the streams and rivers where we fish. And most alarmingly, it's used on a lot of the crops that we consume.
Hmm.
Commercial wheat that's produced in the US is often sprayed with glyphosate right before it's harvested because as it kills the grass, the plant, as a last burst for survival, the plant will pump nutrients into its seeds, which
Hmm.
are like the wheat berries. And so, if industrial farmers spray a wheat crop with glyphosate 2 to 3 days before they harvest it, it increases the yield or the weight of the wheat berries. But then we're eating that stuff. Um, and the whole purpose and engineering behind glyphosate is to kill.
What if it's
But it's
organic?
becoming be part of the food. If it's organic, then that's a certification that says it has not been treated with that chemical. But my particular body is really sensitive to toxicity, so I've spent a lot of time and effort researching about this over the past many years. I've been gluten free for over 10 years, but even in most gluten free products and many organic products, um, there is a level of glyphosate in the commercial food on the shelves that's um, still present
Hmm.
and still above any consideration of a healthy limit, if you can think you have a healthy limit of poison that is okay in your food system. um, But unfortunately, that is what the US food system does. Glyphosate is banned in dozens of countries around the world, including most of the European Union and Mexico, but we continue to use it here in the US, even directly on our food crops.
That's interesting because the company that owns Roundup is a European company.
Now,
Yes.
yeah. hmm Yeah, a lot of the herbicides that are commercially used today, though, were, originally developed as weapons of war. Like, that's where most of these agricultural chemicals come from. They were created by the folks that were, making napalm and making other chemicals that would obliterate life as a method of war. And then when those wars ended, the chemical companies changed to producing agricultural chemicals and became friends with the U.S. government and um, have been pumping industrial chemicals into the food system ever since.
So it sounds like it's important to get glyphosate outlawed in the US.
If I could do one thing to help our environment, whether it was in my town or in my neighborhood or in the state of California or across the federal government, it would be to remove glyphosate. That would be the one thing I could do if I could wave the magic wand.
Are there people trying to do that?
There's people trying to do it, and there's mounting legal evidence against glyphosate. There have been dozens of massive payouts um, and court cases in the past 10 years that have uh, created huge financial judgments against the makers of glyphosate for causing cancer in the people that use it. And so far, these companies have the money to pay that and to also provide the marketing that tells the public that that's not true, that it's not a problem, and that we should keep using it. And um, yeah, I mean, I'm hypersensitive to toxicity. I have some compromised organ function in my own body where I really have to pay attention to this stuff. And
Hmm.
I grow about, my family and I, we grow about 22, 23 different kinds of food on our little 5 acres here in the Central Valley. And earlier this spring, when the grass was starting to get green, I was walking down the road back to my house after visiting the neighbors with my two little kids. And my neighbor was out there on a tractor with a 100-gallon tank spraying
Oh my God.
spraying, just the grass and the little tendrils of weeds that were coming up along our property line. And my orange grove and my stone fruit is right there on the other side of the property line. I'm like, hey, what you spraying there? And he said, just a little Roundup.
Uh-uh.
And I said, well, I really wish you wouldn't.
Yeah.
I said, I know that that stuff's poison, and I'm growing food right here. And he's like, oh, well, I'm spraying it here on my side. And I really got to get these foxtails down. You don't want your dogs to get any foxtails. And I'm like, no, actually, like, I would much rather have the foxtails than, a cancer causing poison in the soil where I'm trying to grow my food,
Yeah.
and that's draining down over my well where
Yeah.
my drinking water is coming from.
Wow. And what did you say?
He wasn't really interested in making a change. I mean, this guy's probably 70. He doesn't have the physical capacity to do the labor. This is the way he's been doing it his whole life. I'm just not interested, and that's a really hard truth about being human.
Wow.
But I think a lot about what I can do as an advocate and as a filmmaker um, to combat that. I have really significant ties to Maui, to the island of Maui, and I've spent part of my life there over the past decade. And more and more chemical farming is coming to Maui right now.
Really?
The same ways that we industrially and chemically farm citrus here in the Central Valley is what's landing on Maui right now. And there, the citrus fields drain directly into the ocean. So all the topical chemicals that are applied to the trees there are going to drain right into the reefs.
What do the people in Maui think about this?
They think they can't change it. They think that big companies, these big international companies that are farming there, are too strong. They think they can't fight it. They think that the government is behind economic growth and behind money to a degree where they don't really care about what's right. They'd rather have the economics of farming production than show concern or limitation in how the farming's being done.
I've never been to Hawaii, but my impression of Hawaii, I guess just through the media and from people that I've talked to that have spent time there, is the local people seem to have a really strong sense of pride,
Mm-hmm.
but yet you're telling me that they don't feel like there's anything they can do. They just
They
have
have a
to.
strong sense of pride, but they don't feel that they have any power.
Uh-huh.
They've been dominated by a U.S. government that came in and took over
Yeah.
just over 100 years ago.
Not that
And
long ago.
yeah, and snatched control of those islands from a thriving monarchy that was doing a really excellent job of taking care of its people. They were really educated, sophisticated people. And the US came over and imposed a different economic system and introduced land ownership and introduced taxes and introduced, centralized government that's operating from a very different perspective that
By
is,
force.
yep, by military force. Unauthorized military force, actually. It was not even backed by the US president. It was a collection of generals and merchant marines who pushed the monarchy out of power.
Who were they?
I don't remember all the exact names, but
Yeah.
there's really brilliant short films and short animations that are circulating right now, even on social media, um, about the overthrow of the Hawaiian government, and it's something that I really feel strongly that every American should pay attention to because, it's a really harsh truth of how America has functioned as a colonial power. Taking control from places that were doing just fine without us.
It was led by Lauren A. Thurston, who was a lawyer and descendant of Christian missionaries. Members included Sanford B. Dole, who became the first president of the Republic of Hawaii. John L. Stevens was ordered 162 U.S. Marines and sailors to land in Honolulu under the pretense of protecting American lives and property. So the
These were all the
Queen,
guys that ran the plantations.
wow.
They were businessmen.
And yeah, President Grover Cleveland initially opposed the overthrow, called it an illegal act. However, in 1898, under President William McKinley, Hawaii was officially annexed to the United States through the New Lands Revolution, and in 1959 became the 50th state of the U.S. Wow. Okay.
Not that long ago.
And the U.S. government officially, in 1993, the U.S. Congress passed an apology resolution officially acknowledging that the overthrow was illegal and that Native Hawaiians never relinquished their sovereignty. But yet, we're still here. We're still,
And the state government.
we're sorry. What we
Yeah.
did was illegal, but we're not giving the land back. So it's
Right.
just, it is what it is. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons that Hawaii is so important to me, is that it's really a place where we can go to look at colonialism and the effect of takeover.
How are you received when you go there?
I am received really well when I go there, because I have put a lot of time and energy into learning how to respect the land and the Native Hawaiians that I meet. I've learned a lot about proper protocol for approaching the land, for approaching the water, and for approaching the people in a way that shares my reverence and my respect and my desire to be there, as a helper.
Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, I mean, I've traveled through all different cultures around planet Earth, right, including a lot of tribal cultures. I've been lucky to come into contact with a lot of Indigenous people that are still living close to the land, that do not have participation in technology or formal education, and that are driven by the rules of respecting nature and respecting each other. And that means, when you're entering new places and meeting new people, that you're coming there correct, that you are listening, that you are paying attention to where you're invited, that you are asking permission to enter any space or place, that you are careful not to extract from that place, that you are looking for ways to give your thanks, energetically, in the form of offerings, in the form of exchanges with people and with place, to say that you're there with respect, and being cautious about how you're participating in the economy too.
What does that
Um,
mean?
well, it means when you're in a new place, paying attention to where you're buying your food. If you're shopping at the Whole Foods, then every dollar that you're spending is going somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to, it's going off island. It's going to a big corporation that's based somewhere else. It's going to the importers that brought the food there from other continents. That's very different than buying and eating the fruit that's grown by your neighbors, or that you're growing on your own land, or even looking for a locally owned business, even if it's as simple as buying a meal or choosing a restaurant, um, looking for something that's locally owned, being cautious and mindful of where you stay. Like in Hawaii, you can imagine, I mean, on the island of Maui, there's only about 120,000 permanent residents. It's not a big place. And if 10% of the housing there is owned by people that live elsewhere and is working as Airbnbs while hotels are sitting empty, that's not helping the people that live there. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so many factors. It's so complicated how we participate in economy. And, once you dig into this, as you said, like everything that we're wearing, most of what we're wearing, or even the technology that we're using, right? It came from other places, and required some level of extraction in order for it to be made. But we also have choices about how much we're using and where we're buying, and paying attention to how we're consuming, and also paying attention to how we're giving back to help offset that in any way that we can.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But I also think that there's, there's a lot to be said in that about how you approach nature too. For example, one of the lines of work that I'm in terms of reconnecting with folks with nature is guiding adventures or guiding retreats or guiding pilgrimages or spiritual experiences, nature bonding experiences. And I've become, increasingly more interested in introducing more folks to the whales and to the dolphins so that we can continue to expand the range of people that have some understanding of these animals and feel their importance and who want to help protect them and want to help advocate for them. So the next retreat that I'm leading is a dolphin retreat. And when I'm thinking about how I'm going to go into the ocean to meet the dolphins, I'm really paying attention to, first of all, where that's legal and where it's safe for the animals. And then specifically looking for operators that are reliable and who have functioned with an ethos of protecting the animal's habitat, protecting their space, participating in being part of the solution that protects them and respects them, um, in the face of a lot of other threats. So, the dolphin retreat that I'll be leading in July is with a really incredible operation called Wild Quest on the island of Bimini in the Bahamas. And I'll be taking a group of folks meeting in Fort Lauderdale and then flying in a small plane over to the tiny little island of Bimini, where we'll spend 5 days on the ocean on a catamaran sailboat,
So you're
seeking
sleeping on the
out.
boat for 5 days?
No, we sleep in a little beautiful little quaint seaside motel that's operated by WildQuest, and then their boat is parked on the quay right out front.
Okay.
So each day you go out on the boat and interact with the wild dolphins. And it's a place where the dolphins have been in contact with people for many, many decades in a way that's peaceful, and that really evokes their curiosity and their sense of play. So the dolphins are very friendly with sailboats and seek out interaction. They love riding the bow. They love checking people out. They love swimming in the water, the clear water, and looking up at humans. And then if you have a pod that's really interested in meeting with you, that's hanging out with the boat, then you have your snorkel gear on and you quietly slip into the water and you're snorkeling at the surface while the dolphins are either feeding around you or foraging on the ocean floor, or sometimes engaging in really active play around you and even with you. So you're coming face to face with the dolphins as they're making their squeaks and their whistles, and you're receiving their sonar. And that's my favorite part of being with them, is being fully immersed in their soundscape, because they use sound not only for communication, but to analyze and even treat each other. They have the capacities to use really concentrated sound to recognize anomalies in the body and to create sonic pulse and bursts that create healing at a cellular level. And there's a growing body of scientific evidence and study with dolphins around the world, of folks who are having tumors and other conditions identified by dolphins that are paying special attention to these areas of injury or illness in their body. And then even experiences of really dynamic healing occurring after these exchanges with dolphin sound. And so that's one of the reasons that folks might want to go meet these animals. Another reason is to really have a firsthand experience of expanding consciousness. so many people in our culture are exploring consciousness through meditation or through psychedelics or through breath work or through yoga. And the biggest, most immediate shortcut that I have found to having a experience of expanded consciousness is being face to face with whales and dolphins, because they are thinking and feeling things that are way beyond our reach. And so when you're in their presence, you're having a very different experience of yourself and who you are and what it means to be connected. So having the unique chance to be eye to eye with them underwater is really it's a life-changing experience. And it's also really awakens our sense of joy and our sense of play, which a lot of humans have trouble coming into contact with these days. So that's my motivation for taking this small group. And that particular trip is about half full at the moment. I have 10 spots remaining on that trip. So
And when is this going to be? July, you said?
July 13th through 19th. Yeah, out of
July
Fort Lauderdale.
13th out of Fort
Hmm.
Lauderdale. So we'll put the information for that in the show notes, along with all your other information. That sounds like just an amazing, once in a lifetime or life changing, healing
Hmm.
adventure.
Yeah,
Men and women invited, or
men,
just
women,
women?
and kids.
Men, women, and kids.
Yeah, this particular retreat is actually designed for families.
Mm,
Um, I've had the really great joy of doing so much of this ocean exploration and wilderness exploration with my family, with my children over the past couple of years. And so for this particular trip, my partner, my kids, and my mom are all joining,
mm,
and we're welcoming families with kids ages 8 and up. Our last trip, our oldest guest was 73 or 74. So this retreat will be designed with kids and families in mind. And then we'll have a range of yoga, meditation, some talks about consciousness and communication for anybody that is interested in that aspect of it. I will teach you some of the tools that I've developed to better communicate and understand the dolphins. And then there'll also be some organized activities for kids to help them bond and play. Yeah,
Are
that's
you collaborating with anyone besides the group that does the tours, or it's just you
on this one.
leading the
It's
group?
it's myself and Wild Quest. Wild
Wild
Quest is the
Quest.
retreat center.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
and
kind of dolphins? Yeah.
they're a really dear, dynamic group of people too.
Hmm.
Energy workers and healers, and their staff is really wonderful. Their folks are from all over the world, and they really gather a very conscious, loving group of people there. And we're swimming with Atlantic spotted dolphins and with
Hmm.
bottlenose dolphins, both,
Okay.
often at the same time because they like to play together.
Okay. They're
Yeah.
friendly with each other.
They're friendly and dynamic. When they meet each other across species, that's when things often get really active.
How
Kind of
so?
their pace kicks up. It's like if you can imagine two groups of kids from the same neighborhood meeting together at the park. Like
Mm-hmm.
once this 6 or 8 kids comes to meet with those 10 kids, all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden there's just this explosion of play and talking and meeting and getting to know each other. And that's what it feels like when the species of dolphins come together. Their pace escalates, their excitement escalates. Yeah. Sometimes when you see some mating activity, they just get really, um, the communication gets more frenetic. They just get really excited to meet up and experience each other.
Hmm.
But it's a
What's the?
really magical experience.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. It's gonna
Hmm.
be a great trip. Uh, what is the differences between the roles of the dolphins and the whales
In
in terms of,
consciousness,
yeah,
or
consciousness and in the physical, all of it?
yeah, I mean, whales are more of guardians and carriers of deep consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
and dolphins, especially if I'm scrolling back now into my knowledge of indigenous cosmologies, because so many indigenous populations, I mean, indigenous populations on every continent of the world have their own understanding of the meanings and importance of whales and dolphins. They all have deep relationships with whales and dolphins. And what's so interesting is even when you start looking at the meanings of whales and dolphins for ancient cultures around the world, there are so many core similarities. And those core similarities are that the whales, particularly the great whales, are revered as wisdom keepers. They are guardians, they are protectors. They're the ones holding the deep wisdom of
Who
planet Earth.
defines that? That's what the indigenous cultures have
in
deemed
these
as.
in these stories and cosmologies, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So everything from looking at ancient Polynesian cultures to indigenous cultures around Africa, the Aboriginal people of Australia and New Zealand had really deep relationships, still have very deep relationships with the whales and the dolphins. um, and um, and also the origins, like this is a bit lost in the history that we learn in the US, but the origins of Greek society and culture are very heavily reliant on dolphins. Um, the founding of some of the original Greek cities are their dolphins that participate in those myths of guiding sailors to the places where the cities would stand. And of the early days of those cities, of dolphins rescuing key personnel, rescuing the child of a leader, or rescuing a very important general from the ocean and bringing these people back to shore or guiding them back to a ship. Dolphins were on some of the oldest coins of Greece and were revered as a direct connection to divinity. There's even evidence of captive dolphin pools in some of the ancient Greek temples where dolphins were brought into the temples to help communicate with the divine.
Wow.
And so dolphins have this energy of across indigenous cultures of lightness and of play and of community, of being guides and of being rescuers. So they're in a much more active relationship with humans as we look across indigenous populations. There's still practices of fishermen in Brazil who fish in connection with dolphins, who are net fishing off the shore, and dolphins are driving fish into nets. And these types of relationships are documented across Australia, New Zealand, off the coasts of Asia, off the ancient coasts of South America, and were part of the tradition for the Greeks too, and in the Mediterranean Sea when dolphins were plentiful there. So there is this extremely deep bank of documented history and storytelling across all cultures of these relationships with whales and dolphins. Um, and yeah, I'm just curious about what that means and what we can be continuing to learn from them now, um, about how to take better care of each other and how to take better care of our oceans and our earth.
It seems like as long as corporations are ruling the world, then it's not going to matter because corporations don't care. They don't have a heart. They don't have a soul.
Well, it's not that they
So
don't have a heart or a soul, but if it's only about money, if money's the only metric.
that's the only metric for corporations.
Yeah, I know. It's a problem.
I have an amazing, it's not my story, but this is one of my clients who, an incredible woman who died a few years ago. She wanted to be buried at sea, and her friend, who's another client of mine, was the one who was tasked with like making this happen for her friend. And she showed me a video of when they went off the coast of Los Angeles, and you have to go a certain number of miles off the coast before you dump a body into the ocean. As they're going out there, all of a sudden all these dolphins started to show up, and there's literally like hundreds and hundreds of dolphins that were like following this vessel out to sea to bury my client at sea.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just like, she showed me the video. I was like, wow. I mean, I've seen dolphins in the ocean when I'm in a sailboat or something, but like the water was white almost, because there were so many dolphins splashing around following the ship as they rested her at sea.
Yeah.
I mean, that just felt like something real profound, like they knew what was going on.
Well, they do know, because they have the capacity to read emotion with their bodies. And we have that capacity too, but we've become really heavily reliant on our brains and on our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But dolphins are much more reliant on their energetic senses, on the electromagnetic signature that every single living body emits. They're reading each other and feeling each other's electromagnetic fields and energetic fields and emotional fields in the water, because their survival depends on it. And we have these capacities to read our energy, read other people's energy, feel the energy in the room. But most of us have been trained to dumb down or suppress that sensitivity so that we can survive in an increasingly chaotic world. And so that we can follow what we're told, what we're instructed to do through our brains, so that we can serve, the institutional structures that we participate in, so that we can go to work all day, every day, whether we want to or not, so that we can participate in society in the way that we've been told to do it. And I think more and more of us are waking up to the fact that that doesn't actually serve our health or well-being. And we're, for speaking for myself, like I've worked for decades to train myself back into that energetic sensitivity, so that I can feel the emotions of other people and other places and other animals and other species, and to use that to inform my work when I'm writing poetry, when I'm making music, so that I'm helping to speak from nature and for nature, instead of having everything be so human-centric.
Our Mother, who art an ocean, hallowed be her name. She makes our air, she loves, she cares. She rocks our boats and sweeps our beaches with waves. She makes you feel something as you watch her storms brew, or even in soft seas, watch her shimmering light change. She shows you her deep when you look out to sea, her nature, her movement, her pace. The flow of shapes fleeting, she's dancing, she's leading, she's calling us back into place. Because we belong here together, a common purpose in service, in healing, in moving with grace.
Waves roll to rock you, sets they move into, pulled down by the earth and held up by the moon.
So let us listen to the sea's needs, shift our focus back to nature. It's time to act now. It's time for a change. Turn our fronts back towards center and lean in together. Feel the light warm us, hearts rearranged. We'll flow in reciprocity. She'll care for you while you care for me. This is how we can make being human on Earth more humane.
Waves roll to rock you, sets they move into, pulled down by the earth and held up by the moon. Waves roll to rock you, sets they move into
In tune. She puts us in our place. If we protect and love her, she will show the way. Can heal this planet. Return to water, in love, in play. We are children of the ocean. Her blood flows in our veins.
Waves roll to rock you.
We all learn from the ocean. Let her lead the way. Roll now with the waves.
Waves roll to rock you.
Rock you
Sets they move into. Pulled down by the earth and held up by the moon.
in water, in love, in play.
Waves roll to rock you.
Rock you.
Sets they move into.
Her blood flows in our veins.
Down by the earth and held up by the moon. Waves roll to rock you.
Rock you
Sets they move into.
in tune.
Pulled down by the earth and held up by the moon.
Let her show the way.
Waves roll to rock you.
Rock you
Sets they move into.
in tune.
Pulled down.
When did that start for you? When did that come about for you as such an important?
I wanted to talk to the animals from the time I could walk. I mean, I grew up in the country, um, rescuing every animal I could get my hands on, whether it was a cat that had found a bird, or we found a baby owl that had come out of a nest, or um, whatever the case. Like, um, when I was a little kid, I was 5 or 6 years old by the time that we were recognizing that wild ducks who were making nests here in the lakes around us, their eggs were being sucked by dogs and by other creatures. So when the wild ducks made nests, one year my mom bought us an incubator and we hatched the wild duck eggs inside of our house. And all those baby wild ducks imprinted on my brother and I and thought that we were their parents. They lived in our bathtub until they got big enough to go out into a pen out in our barn. And we raised them until they got their final feathers. And then we set them free on our lake. And the next year, those ducks that I had raised would come back and nest and approach me with their own babies. So at 5 or 6 years old, I was trying to figure out how can I get those wild baby ducks into my hands, not for the purposes of catching them, but for the purposes of talking to them. I wanted to listen to them. I wanted to be able to communicate with them. And I also recognized early on I was lucky enough to get into horseback riding when I was about 6 years old. I was obsessed with horses. And, when I was 6 years old and weighed 60 pounds, I could not control 1,000-pound animal with my body. I had to figure out how to do it with my energy. How do I communicate with this huge animal with my energy? How do I make it understand where I want it to go? How do I make it feel calm? How do I make it believe that I'm in control? How do I make it understand that I'm confident, that it can trust me? And all of that is energetic. And so I started paying a lot of attention to the ways that animals communicate with each other and use some of their methods of communication instead of trying to talk to them in words or
Is this
us to.
the telepathy?
In part, yeah. I mean, some
Yeah.
people call it telepathy. I relate to it as speaking in images with animals and speaking in energy. I've also done.
When you say speaking in images, are you conjuring an image in your own mind and sharing that telepathically with the animal?
I'm envisioning our exchange. Yeah, I'm envisioning our exchange. So I've also done a lot of wildlife rehab work. So I've had my hands on wild animals that are distressed, that have, whether they've been hit by cars or um, had a gunshot wound, or again, wild birds that have fallen out of a nest. Like, how do I approach those animals and make them understand that I'm a helper? And one of the ways that I learned to do that as a child was to envision and to share with them in my mind I'm approaching you for the reason of helping you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be calm. I'm going to be quiet. I'm going to be slow. I'm going to use my hands to pick you up. I'm going to hold you in a way that feels safe and protected, and communicate that calm and that confidence to them. And that contributes to a much more peaceful exchange, and often contributes to an opportunity to approach an animal and help it. There's cases all over the world of all different kinds of wild animals coming to humans for help. Um, and seeming like they're asking, right? A lot of animals with entanglements in the ocean that have ropes or lines or fishing gear, hooks in their mouths. I can't even recall the number of videos I've seen of sharks approaching divers and peacefully having hooks or fishing gear removed from their bodies.
Wow.
Um, Animals are really intelligent about their own safety. They have to be to survive. So they understand when you are approaching in peace or when you're a threat.
What about aquariums? I mean, are these not like prisons for
Fish prisons, that's
fish?
what you call them.
Yeah, fish prisons.
Last time you were at the aquarium, you told me you were at a fish prison.
Well, because that, Gabrielle is very sensitive to that,
I know.
and it's like we went to the Monterey Aquarium and she is so depressed, like walking around there. It's just like, this is horrible. So is that the way to think about it, or is there a better way to think about, or another way to think about what an aquarium is? I mean, I live in, yeah.
There's another way to think about it. I don't know whether it's better or not, but I do believe that coming into contact with animals is really important. And I do recognize that, the vast majority of humans don't have proximity to a lot of wild animals, and certainly don't have proximity to wild animals that live in the ocean. And, I went through a period of my life and my animal awareness where I, especially after living in Africa, I came back to the US and I thought, I will never go into another zoo. After seeing all these majestic animals living in freedom, I won't ever do that again. But what changed my mind was coming into contact with a particular zoo and getting to know the people that work there, and getting to know the depth of their relationships with the animals that they were caring for, and understanding that, many of these zookeepers had had relationships of years or decades with the animals in their care, and that they had formed bonds that were supportive and nurturing. Does that mean that that lion is going to live a better life in captivity than in the wild? No, I won't ever believe that. But is it important that perhaps that one animal who does live a secure, nurtured life gets to impact the perception of his species for millions of visitors in 15 years? Maybe that makes a difference.
Yeah.
I mean, building those relationships is important. And that doesn't make it any easier, though. And it's really particularly hard for me to think about whales and dolphins in captivity, because I know what they're capable of in the wild. And even since coming into relationship with so many wild orca, being able to witness them at sea, I have made what I think of as pilgrimages to be with orca who are in captivity, and to really spend time with them, trying to understand what they're thinking and feeling, so that I can write from that place and advocate for the end to that kind of captivity. Whales and dolphins do not survive without their people. They don't survive without their pod. They don't survive physically, and they don't survive emotionally. It's also really, thinking about whales and dolphins in captivity has also really changed my view of our prison system. And the cruelty of just the cruelty of putting people away.
Mm-hmm.
People that are struggling, of taking them away from their families and their support systems, and depriving them of relationship with their own parents and with their own children. Um, that's a pretty inhumane thing that we do to each other. And a lot of the folks that are imprisoned for less serious infractions that aren't truly a risk to our society. And it's just hard to think about the millions and millions of people that we have, divided from those who care for them. I don't believe that makes people healthier, or safer, or better. It's just not. It's not a humane or reasonable solution. So yeah, it's given me much deeper compassion for other humans too. Looking at the ways the animals relate to each other.
Some days, the earth sings my songs. Some days, I sing hers. Either way, the words are the same. Our connection is strong, unbreakable, unshakable, way past the unstable, outlast the unable. We will bring this nourishment to the table and serve it up to the ones who are able to drink up our light like an open container, filled with no labels. We gather sunlight, stories to weave into fables, threaded together like webs spun out smooth and stable enough to connect all the rights and no wrongs. Listen. Listen. Discovering the layers, the ways we've gone deep to commune, to belong, together all along. Dark nights quiet and days of silence stretched so long. We tried talking, but every time our lost voices found their way into a song. My words, your tune, under a full moon, space emerged, and not a minute too soon to release control and just feel what it means to live in tune. There is a resonance, resplendent, full of contrast like night and day. Like ocean waves, rock soft then rage, move through all of the feelings, each just a stage, like the moon spends all day shifting her phase. The light rise and dark sides all fall into place, or float off far, far away, until we zoom out beyond, looking back on Earth from space, and see that we are here, spinning blue sphere, moving in season, in bloom, making room, seeking, leaking, streaming through bleeding hearts, beating the rhythm of a river and the stillness of a mountain, all seeking that wide open sea whose depth schools around us, teeming like silver fish, like a lifelong wish, like slippery magic that calls us deeper within.
Using your creative abilities as a poet or your work as a producer
Mm-hmm.
through music. How are you using your creative platform to advocate for these different areas, whether it be nature and whales, dolphins, or the soil and the ground, the earth, or even people in prison? Like
Yeah.
what are you doing to, how are you using your creative abilities?
Trying to have a lot more of these open, complicated conversations like you and I are doing today, because I know that listening to others think about these things and talk about these things is what has opened my mind to thinking broader about how we treat each other. Um, and then, in a more specific sense, starting to focus more of my filmmaking towards advocacy, making short films about regenerative agriculture and the risks of industrial farming and industrial monoculture, um, making films like the documentary Ocean Souls that really advocates for um, the likeness of whales and dolphins to humans, and the fact that they should also have rights to live safe and free lives. I'm supporting a film with a filmmaker out of the Middle East right now that is advocating for the end to all dolphin and whale captivity, and highlighting technological innovations that might help us get to know whales and dolphins better through AI and hologram experiences instead of relying on having actual animals in tanks.
Who is
Um,
this? How did you come into
that
contact with this
filmmaker
individual?
is his Ran Levi Yamamori, and I met him at a film festival in New York a couple years ago. We both had award-winning films in that festival in 2021. He made a film called Bridging Troubled Waters about the whale hunts that are still happening in the Faroe Islands.
Where are the
And
Faroe Islands?
they're like up off the coast of Denmark,
Hmm.
yeah, in the northern seas. And pilot whales are still hunted there on an almost annual basis um, for the purposes of what's really a historical display of an old school whale hunt that used to be a major source of food for the people of that really isolated island, but now is really just a connection to their culture. But Rand made this really beautiful film called Bridging Troubled Waters that helped me see the world through whales' perspective. And I've been supporting his filmmaking efforts financially and also as a friend and advisor for a couple of years. Um, so he and I went to San Diego together a few years ago to be in person with the orca in captivity there.
Who
To
died? Or no,
shoot
who's
some
still there?
different animal.
Okay.
The animals that we were with there were born in captivity
Mm.
and have been SeaWorld property since they were born. But we were just there to learn firsthand more about what life is like for them and to compare them with our experiences with wild orca. And some of the footage from that visit will be part of this film that's in process. I'm also supporting the making of a film called Where the Forest Roars, which is about human elephant conflict in the foothills of the Himalaya. That's being made by a really dynamic wildlife advocate named Kim Frank. She's based in Idaho, but is currently in London wrapping up the final work on that film. Um, yeah, thinking more about the potential of making a film about chemical use on Maui and trying to raise some public awareness and political will around that. Um, and then with my poetry, I have used my poetic work to support a traveling live show project called Sounds of the Ocean, which features the recorded sounds of humpback whales, blue whales, fin whales, and dolphins out of the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. And we pair that with really gorgeous music by the producer and director of the show, Joshua Sam Miller. He plays percussion instruments, saxophone, and clarinet alongside the whale and dolphin sounds, and creates this immersive experience that mimics the sonic sensations of diving into the sea, coming face to face with the dolphins and then the whales, and then also experiencing some of the noise pollution of the oceans before you reemerge. And we've performed that show live, not only in big public venues, but at huge in advocacy spaces. That show has been part of the last few COP climate conferences and has also been part of several UN World Oceans Day events where delegates who are making decisions about the future of the environment and the future of the oceans are experiencing that show,
Hmm.
um, in the hopes that they will really consider the needs and the voices of the whales and the dolphins as they're thinking about the future of, uh, of the oceans.
Have they?
Have they
Did it
thought about it
work?
more?
Did it work? Did it
It's
help?
hard to say. That world is so convoluted. That world of international policy is so convoluted, and it's really hard to see where the decision making impact happens. But I am at least grateful that that level of artwork is part of the space and part of the conversation. When I've been there in person at those events, either performing or participating and sharing the music and sharing the message, I have seen an increased awareness that of non-human needs. Let's just put it that way, of the needs of not only the animals but of the ecological needs of the oceans and how they impact our human health. So I feel like we are making some contribution to that conversation.
Amazing. Is is this show still touring around?
It is. So we actually have developed a film version, and so at present there is a full dome, like a planetarium. The film is a really cool experience inside a planetarium screen because you're sitting under that big bubble dome screen that's above you, and you feel as though the life-size whales are swimming over you. That's
Hmm.
really spectacular to experience. And we are exploring the possibilities of translating that show into an IMAX or 3D version as well
Hmm.
here in the next 12 to 24 months. And so the full dome version has been touring around the world. We've shared it on the Hawaiian Islands. Joshua is currently really active sharing it across Europe. Um, he's still doing live performances for the show. The Sounds of the Ocean team just hosted a retreat on Maui that had to do with humpback whales, sound healing, and consciousness. So, bringing together guests from Australia, Canada, across North America to experience the humpback whales firsthand, and then also to experience the creativity and art of meeting these animals through music and through their sounds and through meditation. Um, so those are some of the efforts that we're making. Yeah. Also, I've been active in supporting some of the um, Indigenous wisdom organizations on Maui who are doing ocean protection work and um, perpetuating the really important knowledge of traditional ways of ocean navigation and of Hawaiian culture and of chants and sound healing, um, for purposes of teaching those techniques to young people and staying in connection with the land and oceans in those ways. Yeah, those are just some of the ways that I try to participate.
Amazing. Are you open? Like, I'm just thinking of if somebody listening wants to connect with you or wants to experience one of these films
Mhm,
or know when the sounds of the ocean is coming to a town near them. Like, is
totally.
that through your Instagram, your website, all of the above?
Yeah, Instagram, website, and email, and
Mm,
I'll be happy to include all of those in the show notes. My
yeah.
Instagram handle is at Wild Wonder Nature. And then I'll include my website and some of those websites for Sounds of the Ocean and for the Ocean Souls film, so folks can find those. And then the biggest thing that people can do is to share this work with their friends and family, to just keep, if you are a fan of the film or a fan of the music, keep it moving. Send it to a few more people, because increasing the way that we're having these conversations is a benefit. The more of us that are thinking about what we can do to make a difference is a benefit. Even choosing one action that you're going to take, or one thing that you're going to change about how you use plastic, or how you choose to participate. Like, every single action makes a difference. And it is hard when we think about these big picture environmental challenges. It's really easy for folks to default to apathy and to say, oh, it's too big a problem, there's nothing I can do. Well, that's what they want you to think,
Exactly. Yeah.
Literally every choice that you make matters. And so I invite you to participate however that feels right for you. There are lots of people in your community educating about how to do good things, ecologically and environmentally. Find something local and get involved, whether it's making a small donation, whether it's volunteering, whether it's participating in a beach cleanup, whether it's picking up trash next time you're at a park, whether it's choosing not to buy that one extra plastic thing. Like, every single choice you make matters. And just reminding people that, you are a part of this, the ecology of this earth. And the earth depends on you. The earth wants to nurture you. The earth wants to feed you. And she also wants to be fed and cared for and nurtured in return. So all the choices we make have an impact.
Yes. Amazing. Wow. What else do you want to share with us, Amber? What is there something that we didn't cover? I feel like
There's a lot of things that we didn't cover.
But tell me.
No, I don't.
Let's
I
keep
really
going
don't.
then.
I don't have it specific. I just feel. I feel really grateful for the role of astrology in my life. That's one thing I didn't get to say.
Tell me. Yeah. How so? Because I just want to tell a little story about how, because like my journey as an astrologer, like, you're a big part of it, because it was May of 2017. It was my brother-in-law's 40th birthday party, and he had his birthday party on a yacht in I think it was Marina del Rey or something. It was
like parked in a harbor. We did not go to
exactly.
sea.
We didn't go out. It's like, it was really cheesy. It's like everyone's wearing like cheesy 1970s, 1980s like yacht rock type clothing.
Yeah, you looked like straight out of Hawaii Five-0. You look like Tom Selleck that night.
But I remember, very distinctly, like seeing you at the party, and you just like, you looked at me and you're like, so what are you up to right now? And I'm like, I'm an astrologer now. And you're like, what? Wow. Okay. Like, you were just kind of like taken aback by it, but like in a good way. You were excited. And, you were with your husband, Cody. And I remember the next day, like, you texted me that Cody was saying that I woke up this morning and I was just thinking about what Scott was saying about astrology. Like, it like really, like, I don't know, made me think differently. I don't know what I said exactly, but probably something that like the next time the planets and stars will be aligned the way that they were aligned when you were born is over 25,000 years from the date, time, and place of your birth. And so but you were very encouraging and very supportive of me, and one of the most profound moments aside from that, and just having like your reaction and your interest and your respect, because when I was telling people I was an astrologer, like, you get so many strange looks from people, and you were one of the few people that didn't look at me strange. You were excited, you were like, this is awesome, okay, let's talk more about this. And then I went over to your parents' house and to do a reading for you and your mom. And, after talking to the two of you for like 2 hours about your astrological codes, and your mom said, okay, I have to go to dinner. I got a dinner. I got to go get ready. And you and I hung back in the room where we were. And then we ended up going into the kitchen, like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes later. And your mom had left like, I don't know, $300 or $400, $500, like $100 bills, just like
Hmm.
on the counter
Hmm.
for me. And I was like, whoa, okay, like
Well, and
I
that's one
was,
of my other passions, as a role I've played in so many people's lives as a mentor and as a friend, is I really love seeing people's like soul talents come to life.
hmm,
And when folks find a way to align their kind of their soul's purpose and their spirituality with the actual work they're doing in the world, that really excites me, because I see that as a reconnection of those severed, relationships with nature and self. And that's why I've been so supportive of your efforts to not only study astrology but to make it into a business, because I've really been excited about you reaching people.
hmm,
And astrology, what I've learned about astrology through you, which is pretty deep, like I at this point know as much as a lot of working astrologers. um, I've really learned so much about myself and about my family, about the core
hmm,
people that I have relationships in my life, my soul family, my dearest friends who I love and nurture and care for, and my actual blood family.
hmm,
And it has increased not only the depths of my understanding, but it's really enabled me to love those people better
hmm.
and to be more
Yes.
generous and more compassionate and more supportive to them on their life's path. And so at every turn, as you've been developing the weekly transit, the podcasts, the readings, and evolving it into a business, I have seen not only you become so much happier and healthier in your own life because you're serving your purpose and serving your community,
Hmm,
but I've seen the way that you have affected a similar change for at first dozens and now hundreds and maybe thousands of people around you, as you're helping people come into better alignment with who they are,
hmm.
to learn about who they are, to learn about their needs, to learn about their capacities and their capabilities. And I think that the more of us who are working in our area of soul purpose, the better off we're going to be as a species. The more good we're going to be able to do. And
Yes.
so I've been cheering for you,
Hmm.
every moment of the evolution of yeah, of the weekly transit and all the things you've done. And the books are beautiful. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, I've just always been really excited about what you're doing.
You've been just such a constant, continuous support from the beginning. From that first moment that I told you in Marina Del Rey to, your mom paying me for that reading. I didn't even ask for money, and I was just like, wow, okay, I feel like seen and appreciated. To now, your song
It's
is
valuable.
like
Hmm.
the theme song for the weekly transit.
Yeah,
It's just,
and then you've done readings for 10 members of my family, for 3 generations of my family, and you've
wow.
really helped understand the ways that we're linked, right? From
Mm,
generation to generation, how
yes.
from grandparents to parents to grandkids, how we're organized, how we feed
Yes.
each other, how our astrology is intertwined so that we are, constellated as this body of people who are specially prepared to support each other, love each other, teach each other, challenge each other. And
Yes.
it's been a huge blessing to my family's dynamic and understanding of one another. It's been
Hmm.
a core part of our lives and making decisions and guiding my creative emergence. So that all makes a big difference in the world.
Wow, I really appreciate that. That's yeah, it means a lot to me to be seen by you, and to receive that reflection, and to know that the knowledge that I've imparted to you and your family has helped support you and your family
Hmm.
to love and appreciate each other more, because ultimately that's always my goal, is to help people understand who they are so they can accept, appreciate, and love who they are. And
Hmm.
when we're talking about families, or people that are in relationship with each other, is to help you understand them so that
Yeah.
you can accept, appreciate, and love them for who they are. So Yeah, it was a great joy to do like that family reading that I did for you, your dad, and your brother, your mom.
Hmm.
It's yeah, really, really, it's that's my joy right there. So my soul. Would you say your soul purpose or your
Yeah,
soul?
your soul's
Yeah,
purpose.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think we're all more
Yes,
fulfilled when we learn how to step more firmly onto that path, you know?
totally,
So
absolutely, yes. Hmm.
I feel lucky to be doing that in my life.
When
Yeah,
you've
and to
done that,
see.
you've come more into your soul's purpose. Like, I feel like we've been on a similar trajectory
The
since
last few years.
that moment in
Hmm.
2017, over the last 8 years. Uh, it's interesting because 2016 is, yeah, 26, was it? No, 2016. Yeah, 2016 is a 9, and
Hmm.
so 2016 was a 9, and then 2017 was like when we had that moment. It was May of 2017. That's the 1 year, and
Hmm.
so now we're back to the 9 year,
Hmm. Hmm.
and next year's 2026 is going to be a 1.
Right.
So we're kind of closing the chapter on
Hmm.
this last 9 years, and then moving into a new phase. But I've seen so much growth in you, in your trajectory, and really tapping into your creative abilities. And I think of you as, you're a fifth house north node,
Hmm.
south node in the 11th house, and you're all about the community, and wanting to help society. And I'm just like always pushing you. It's like you have to shine your star. You gotta,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that's gonna help the society. That's gonna help the community. Is the more that you're shining bright and being that benevolent queen of service. When you think of Virgo in
Hmm.
your fifth house, Virgo North Node, you're here to be the queen of service. So, and in a sense, that's what you're doing through the poetry and producing. You are being of service to other artists, but not in uh, not in their shadow.
Yeah.
It's yeah.
And that's the other thing to say about people reaching out is, I've done so many spontaneous collaborations over the years. Like every major project I am involved in has started with some kind of soul aligned connecting conversation.
Mm,
So, yeah, for folks who are hearing this and have a strong pull to share something, please pass it on because that's the way that, creative sparks are born in the world. And yeah, I really believe in learning more deeply about yourself in order to follow the path of your own well-being and fulfillment and be of service to the world. And astrology is a primary language and system for learning that in my experience. So
yes,
thanks for all that you
absolutely.
share.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, Amber. So tell me your Instagram again.
At Wild Wonder Nature.
At Wild Wonder Nature,
Mhm.
and
And
you
my
have a
website is amberherzoglyman.com.
okay,
Yep.
amberherzoglyman.com, and all of that will be in the show notes if anyone wants to connect and reach out, and or go on the retreat and
Yeah, the
have
dolphin
that like
retreat.
life altering experience of sitting in the water face to face with a bottlenose dolphin, or it's like wild. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, wild wonder adventure. Yes. Uh what final like words of wisdom? I mean, you've shared so much, and I think about just doing one thing to to collaborate with the world, or to don't worry about changing everything, but just what is one thing you can do to make a better choice in terms of your impact towards the world, towards the earth. But like what else, and any other
I,
final?
I really just want to encourage people to develop their own relationship with their intuition.
Hmm.
Follow the pull of what you love when it comes to your relationship with the natural world, or even with your own community. If there's something that matters to you, that you know that that is a place where it's got your attention and where it's calling to you, learn more. Learn how to make some kind of little small contribution. And everybody who takes action locally is making global impact. So just a reminder that being connected in your local community, and being of help, being of service, or supporting those who are, is really a huge, it is the momentum of changing how we interact as a society. So yeah, follow your intuition about that. If there's something that pulls for your attention, pulls for your care, then that's where you should put your effort.
Amazing. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Yes, great to have you here.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to the Weekly Transit, interviews and conversations from an astrological lens. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach, from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. If you're interested in being a guest on the Weekly Transit, you can email me at scott@theweeklytransit.com. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.